Imagine standing in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The air is so hot, it bends in front of your eyes. The sand beneath your feet is scorching at 158 degrees Fahrenheit. There is nothing alive here. No sound, no movement, just heat and silence. Then, a man in a white protective suit walks forward. He sets down a wooden crate, then another, then another. Dozens of crates, lined up across the dunes like a ritual. He steps back. Someone gives a signal, and the lids open. What comes out isn't soldiers, isn't machinery, isn't some miracle chemical sprayed from above. It's bees. Millions of them, bursting out of their crates like a living storm cloud, rising above the sand, spiraling into the blazing sky, right in the middle of the hottest desert on Earth. And here's the question nobody can answer yet. What happens next? If you've never asked yourself whether a bee could defeat a desert, you're about to. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this one goes places you won't expect. Let's be clear about something first. Bees are not just honey machines. They are the engine of the living world. In the United States alone, nearly 1/3 of all crops depend on honeybee pollination. We're talking apples, almonds, melons, broccoli, lettuce, staples of the human diet. In Europe, 80% of all crops and wild flowering plants depend on bees. Remove bees from that equation, and within a single generation, 9 out of 10 plant species begin to disappear. And when plants go, everything else follows. Herbivores lose their food, predators lose their prey. The chain doesn't bend, it snaps. But the reverse is also true. When bees return to a place they've abandoned, life erupts, flowers bloom, seeds travel farther, entire ecosystems wake up from the inside out. Scientists call it a cascade effect, one small change triggering an avalanche of life. That's the idea behind releasing bees into the Sahara, not just to make honey, but to start a chain reaction in a place where life stopped thousands of years ago. But before we ask whether it can work, we have to ask whether the bees can even survive. Here's the brutal truth about the Sahara. It is not standing still. Stretching across 11 countries, from Morocco and Algeria in the west, through Libya and Egypt, all the way to Sudan and Somalia, this desert is the largest hot desert on Earth. In Algeria, it covers 80% of the land. In Libya, 95%. In Egypt, 2/3 of the entire country is already buried under sand. Satellite images taken between 1920 and today show the Sahara has expanded by roughly 10% in under a century. It swallows pastures, it buries towns, it doesn't ask permission. Egypt tried to fight back by drilling irrigation systems into the dunes, green crop circles visible from space, floating in the middle of nowhere. A desperate attempt to prove the desert can be fooled. The desert is not fooled. So now someone wants to send bees in there? Here's the problem. Bees begin dying at 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The Sahara sand reaches 158 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside an overheating hive, beeswax, the very material used to build the hexagonal cells that hold larvae, honey, and pollen, begins to soften and collapse. The structure melts. The young die inside. The queen stops laying eggs. In 2022, in the Moroccan village of Enzeri, spring arrived with silence instead of buzzing. Entire colonies had died overnight from drought and heat. For a village where beekeeping was the primary source of income, it wasn't just an ecological loss, it was economic devastation. And Morocco sits at the northern edge of the Sahara zone. If bees are already dying there, what chance do they have in the heart of the desert? That's what everyone thought, until scientists looked more carefully. There is a bee species that the desert has already tested for thousands of years. It's called the Nubian honeybee, Apis mellifera geminitica, and it lives in Sudan, Somalia, and the southern Arabian Peninsula, right along the edge of the Sahara. Scientists who've studied it say its heat resistance is, in their own words, one of a kind. Here's what makes it different. Its body is slightly smaller than a regular honeybee. That matters enormously. A smaller body sheds heat faster, less surface area holding heat in. When a hive fills with small-bodied bees, there's more airspace between them, meaning the hive doesn't trap heat the way larger colonies do. Young larvae don't get cooked alive. Its colouring is lighter and more yellowish, which reflects sunlight rather than absorbing it. Its body hair is shorter, which also reduces heat retention. Basically, it came factory installed with a built-in sun protection system. But the most extraordinary thing? Its genetics. Nubian bees carry cellular differences that alter how their bodies respond to heat stress at the biochemical level. They behave differently. They forage differently. They even reduce colony size voluntarily during extreme heat. A biological thermostat that no engineer could design better. And then, there's the discovery that shook the scientific world. In 2009, deep in the Libyan desert, near the Kufra oasis, researchers found something nobody expected: a living, working colony of honeybees. Isolated in the middle of the Sahara, no human caretaker, no irrigation, no support. Genetic analysis revealed these bees had been living there in total isolation from the rest of the world for approximately 5,000 to 10,000 years. Stranded in the oasis when the Sahara's climate shifted suddenly around 11,000 years ago, transforming what had once been green savanna, lakes, and rivers into the furnace we know today. They didn't leave, they adapted. And if isolated bees survived 10,000 years in the Sahara without any help, what could a deliberately introduced, heat-resistant species do with proper planning behind it? But there's a problem even bigger than the heat, and it's not coming from the desert. Since the 1990s, beekeepers across North America, Europe, and Asia began reporting something terrifying: entire hives dying overnight. Not weakened, not struggling, gone. Every year, at least a third of all managed honeybee colonies in the United States were disappearing. The culprit had a name: Varroa destructor, a parasitic mite barely visible to the naked eye that latches onto a bee's body, pierces its shell, and drains its internal fluids. It doesn't just weaken the bee, it carries viruses. The most devastating of these is the deformed wing virus, which causes bees to develop useless, crumpled wings and die before they can fly or work. Varroa originally came from Asia, where it had lived alongside the Asian honeybee for millennia. Those bees learned to fight back, developing what scientists call hygienic behavior, tossing out infected larvae and grooming mites off each other. A biological arms race that reached a delicate balance. Then, sometime in the 1950s, the mite jumped species. It found the European honeybee, the one responsible for most of the world's honey and crop pollination. And European bees had no defenses, no history, no immunity. The mite spread through hives like wildfire. By 2022, it had reached every continent on Earth, except one. Australia had been the last holdout. Then, an outbreak hit New South Wales. The government destroyed over 28,000 hives, roughly 40 million bees, in a desperate attempt to contain it. The eradication program cost over $130 million US, and even then, success wasn't guaranteed. But here's what nobody talks about enough. African bees don't care about Varroa. East African honeybees, particularly in sub-Saharan populations, show near complete resistance to the mite. Local beekeepers rarely lose colonies to it. Scientists believe the same genetic toughness that helped these bees survive drought and heat also gave them immunity to the parasite that's destroying everyone else. This means that if the Sahara experiment succeeds, if bees take root in the desert and their population expands, those colonies could become a genetic reservoir, a backup for the world. If European or American bee populations collapse, Africa's resistant stock could be the seed for rebuilding them. The desert, in other words, might be the last safe vault for life on Earth's most important insect. Now, before we get carried away with turning the Sahara green, there's something you need to know, something that changes everything. The Sahara should not disappear. Every year, the Sahara Desert releases between 400 and 700 million tons of dust into the atmosphere. Winds pick it up, carry it across the Atlantic Ocean, over the Mediterranean, and scatter it across the planet. It reaches the Amazon rainforest, Scandinavia, Japan. That dust carries iron and phosphorus, minerals that marine bacteria, ocean plankton, and rainforest plants cannot survive without. The Amazon soil is notoriously poor in phosphorus. The Sahara delivers approximately 22,000 tons of phosphorus per year to the Amazon basin, almost exactly replacing what seasonal floods wash away. The desert is, effectively, feeding the rainforest from 3,000 miles away. Remove the Sahara, and the ocean food chain weakens. The Amazon begins to starve. Global climate systems that have run for millennia shift in ways nobody can predict. So the vision isn't to erase the desert. It's something far more precise, to find the edges, the borderlands, the oases, the semi-arid zones, and slowly, carefully, begin restoring life there, one hive at a time. Not to destroy the Sahara, but to negotiate with it. And maybe, just maybe, the bee is the only diplomat small enough to get the job done. In 2023, researchers placed test colonies of heat-adapted bees along the southern Saharan border zones. The results aren't fully published yet. The desert hasn't given its answer, but somewhere out there, right now, in the shimmering heat above the sand, millions of tiny wings are beating, cooling their hive, collecting what little moisture the air holds, surviving against everything that should kill them. Maybe that's what makes the Sahara experiment the most quietly extraordinary thing happening on this planet. Not rockets, not AI, not satellites, bees. In my opinion, this entire experiment is a powerful example of human courage and curiosity. Introducing bees into a place where life barely exists is not a simple idea. It's both a risk and a source of hope. I believe nature is not something we can fully control, but it is something we can learn to work with. Sending bees into the Sahara may not be about defeating the desert, but about understanding and working in balance with it. What I find most interesting is how this experiment shows that even the smallest creatures can have a global impact. At the same time, it's important that we don't become overconfident, because history has shown many cases where human intervention caused more harm than good. If this project is carried out carefully, with proper scientific planning, it could become a game changer for the future. In the end, my opinion is that whether bees transform the Sahara or not, this experiment will definitely transform human thinking. It teaches us not to dominate nature, but to live in harmony with it. If you made it this far, drop a comment. Do you think bees can change the desert? Share this with someone who loves nature, and I'll see you in the next one.